Abandoning an upgrade package is always bad news for a Formula 1 team. Ferrari removing its latest floor and sidepod upgrade during the British Grand Prix weekend shows the alarm bells are ringing at Maranello, and they should be, loudly. Ferrari is suffering from one of the key problems that limits performance with Formula 1's ground effect cars in the bouncing or porpoising it suffers from in high-speed corners. That's become worse since the latest upgrade package was deployed at last month's Spanish Grand Prix. But worryingly for Ferrari, Carlos Sainz calls this an intrinsic weakness. So why has it become so big a problem that Ferrari took the extreme step of ditching the floor and bodywork changes for Silverstone, especially considering it wasn't long ago the Ferrari SF24 was emphatically the second best car of 2024 and Red Bull's closest challenger? Ferrari made a small performance step with a package introduced at Imola in May. The upgrade featured modified front and rear wings, but the key changes were to the sidepod inlet and the floor. The sidepod inlet was originally a more vertical shape, but at Imola moved towards more of a letterbox style. This created space to improve the airflow through the undercut at the front of the sidepod and around the side of the car. The visible floor changes were small, with a small inlet duct appearing on the edge of the floor, but there were more significant tweaks underneath and out of view. The Spain package focused on floor changes, but also further refined the sidepod undercut shape. The floor changes were to the fences, the edges, the diffuser and the floor body. That included lowering the roof at the front of the floor. Ferrari senior engineer Jock Clear said this upgrade had been somewhat fast-tracked, but was very much along similar lines to the Imola update in terms of continuing on the same development path. While much of Ferrari's development progress over the past year has been focused on improving the consistency of the car to make it more benign after rear instability made it tricky to drive in the first half of last season, Clear described the Spain package as an incremental upgrade, a little more downforce, a little less drag. Unfortunately, the gains the team expected the upgrade to bring in terms of performance have not been delivered because of the high-speed bouncing problems the car is suffering from. However, when the speed of the corners dropped below the threshold for porpoising, they found the car worked as anticipated. That's why in terms of downforce generation, team principal Fred Vasseur says that the new parts are correlating with the data from the wind tunnel. The trouble is that although you can simulate the downforce produced, there are other characteristics that aren't so easy to detect in the wind tunnel and CFD. But even without the bouncing, Sainz says high-speed corners are a weakness, but that the bouncing problems increase the deficit in such turns, or as he puts it, makes the Ferrari acceleratedly slow in the quick stuff. The positive is that the upgrade was doing what it should be in slower corners. As Sainz says, we see it working when we have no bouncing. For the British Grand Prix, Ferrari attempted to improve the rigidity of the floor in order to eliminate the problem. Charles Leclerc ran the upgraded package throughout Friday, with Sainz on the old specification. Although the later spec was faster, it was noticeably trickier to drive. From Saturday onwards, both ran the old spec car. This made the car slower, but easier to drive. As a result, Ferrari was firmly fourth best of the top four teams at Silverstone, and Sainz finished a distant fifth. Teammate Charles Leclerc was running 7th when he made the disastrous decision to pit for intermediates too early, finishing a lapped 14th and continuing a run of races he describes as worse than a nightmare. The talk of bouncing will surprise those who thought this was a problem vanquished in the early days of this rule set in 2022. But the fact is that it is always there lurking for ground effect cars. The current F1 machines are the most advanced ground effect racing cars ever made. Teams are constantly pushing the limits of what they are capable of. Given the closer to the ground you run, the more downforce you produce, that's exactly where you need to put the car. The trouble is, you risk triggering bouncing. And the reason it is a problem in quick corners is the higher the speed of the car, the more downforce is created by the powerful Venturi tunnels in the underfloor. As you get lower, so the downforce increases, exponentially. But there's a point where the proximity to the ground exceeds the capacity of the floor to deal with the airflow and you get an aerodynamic stall. That reduces downforce and the car rises. Then the stall clears and the downforce builds again until it hits the stall point, and that causes the bouncing. You can get bouncing on the straights and Ferrari has a bit of that. But in corners under lateral load, even ultra-stiff F1 cars are no longer running flat relative to the ground, so one side of the floor is closer than the other, and Sainz stresses that is the problem. So Ferrari has a car that does produce more downforce thanks to running the floor more aggressively. However, what it can't do is generate that aerodynamic load without hitting bouncing problems, and that's something that Red Bull, McLaren and Mercedes can do. And while bouncing is easy to trigger for teams, for example Red Bull encountered a little in Spain but could dial it out, it's a problem Ferrari keeps hitting. So how does Ferrari solve this? Well, if we had the answer to that, we'd probably be ready for a job as a highly paid head of aero at Maranello, but Ferrari is working on a fix. The troublesome upgrade package is expected to return in Hungary, although the team has yet to confirm that. It's also likely to be in modified form, as it's clear there's a fundamental problem Ferrari needs to fix in order to run the car close enough to the ground to generate the downforce it wants without hitting trouble. Vasseur admits that in the longer term it's likely that the Spain update will have to be replaced by a new package that the team is working to develop. The experiments on Friday at Silverstone, where the cars ran in different configurations, will be crucial in this process, with Leclerc saying the team learned a lot. Vasseur likened this to the experimentation Ferrari did last year at Zandvoort, compromising Friday practice to focus on test work that set it in a positive direction, and Vasseur is hopeful that his team can repeat the trick. Ferrari's problem is an aerodynamic one, as Vasseur is confirmed. While the suspension plays a key part in this, there's another car in the field that suggests this isn't the root of the problem. That's the Haas VF24, which has the same mechanical platform as the Ferrari thanks to the team's technical partnership. Nico Hülkenberg even outqualified both Ferraris at Silverstone. When I asked Haas aerodynamics team leader Luca Matteli whether his car suffered from the same problems Ferrari did, he said bouncing has not been a problem for it in 2024. What's more, Haas also uses the Ferrari wind tunnel, meaning that it's not a hardware problem that's making the difference. And while it's likely that Haas is not chasing the downforce quite as aggressively as Ferrari, and therefore might have a car that's a little more confidence-inspiring for the driver, that's a concern for those at Maranello. The Ferrari does have more downforce in its upgraded spec, but it's causing other problems. And make no mistake, bouncing does cost time and can also work the tyres harder. The trouble is, it might not be a quick fix. What's more, Ferrari is fighting to sort it after the departure following the British Grand Prix of technical director Enrico Cardile, who will join Aston Martin. But Ferrari needs to act fast, because if it's going to keep pace with its rivals at the front, it needs to crack this problem and make the car significantly less prone to bouncing. So where are the rest of the field in terms of bouncing troubles? Well, as mentioned, the super stiff Red Bull can encounter it, but it's easy to adapt the car to dial it back. That's something Ferrari has not been able to do. However, Red Bull has also struggled at times with its extreme lateral stiffness at the rear, meaning the car lacks suspension compliance, hence its Monaco struggles. The McLaren and Mercedes appear to be a long way from inducing such problems, although F1's fifth place team, Aston Martin, has struggled with this since introducing its own upgrade in Spain. RB has no such problems. However, it has had to roll back on part of its own Spain upgrade, running about 50% of it at Silverstone because it was struggling to achieve consistent through-corner balance. That's another common problem with these cars, when the aero doesn't work consistently when in yaw, so when turning through the corners. Alpine has a car that struggles particularly for front-end grip and battles understeer. Sauber struggles for consistency in the high speed and doesn't ride bumps well. Williams lacks for all-round aerodynamic load but can run well at compromised downforce tracks, while the Haas is a good, consistent all-round car, but one that now struggles a little in the medium-speed corners. The bottom line is that with these regulations there are always limitations to be hit. But bouncing is one of the most difficult ones to eliminate, and performance sapping. And that's why getting on top of it is essential for Ferrari's hopes of keeping pace with its rivals at the front, and being in a position to fight for the title next year.